Kayla. This video will consist of 3 main topics that we have discussed throughout the course that have stood out to me. The first one is genetic versus environment, then consistency, then emotion. To demonstrate these 3 topics, I have chosen the character Emma Swan. Emma Swan is from the TV show Once Upon a Time. For those of you who haven't seen Once Upon a Time, I'm going to give a brief summary of what happens. In the Enchanted Forest, the character Snow White meets character Prince Charming, and as you can assume, they fall in love and have a baby. This baby is in fact Emma Swan. Now the character, the Evil Queen, does not like Snow White. When she finds out she's having a baby, she separates the baby and their parents at birth. She does this by sending the parents to a place called Storybrooke, and all the characters from the Enchanted Forest as well, while sending Emma to New York. Now at this point, Emma is still a baby, so she ends up being bounced around in the foster care system throughout New York all by herself. She goes from family to family, but each family she gets to, it simply doesn't work out. This leaves Emma feeling lost and unwanted and unloved, until one day she comes into a foster care family with the mother named Ingrid. She feels happy with Ingrid, and she's loving this family. One day, Ingrid shows Emma that she has magic. Now, Emma's not too sure how she feels about this. How does Ingrid even have magic? Turns out Ingrid was from Storybrooke, but when the Queen wasn't looking, she left and went to New York and found Emma and became her foster mom. However, Emma's surprised at this and doesn't quite believe her. Scared and freaked out, Ingrid erases her memory. This is when Emma then runs and tries to find a place to go, and she runs into a girl named Lily. They inevitably become best friends as they're both lost in the foster care system. As they get older, they part ways. Emma then meets a male named Neil, who becomes her boyfriend, and they have a baby named Henry. But then something horrible happens. Neil disappears. Alone and left with a baby, Emma gives him up for closed adoption, never to see him again. Until one day, Henry returns to find Emma and tell her all about Storybrooke and magic. Emma, not being too sure about this, decides to just go along and return Henry. This is where she meets the Evil Queen, which is actually Henry's foster mom, and her parents, Snow White and Prince Charming. She also meets Captain Hook, who ends up being her boyfriend. So there's a short little summary to keep you updated while we analyze Emma Swan's personality. The first topic we will look at is genetics versus environment. I chose to analyze Emma Swan because she comes in contact with multiple people who are both in her environment, such as Ingrid, her foster mom at one point, and her very best friend that she met, Lily. She also comes in contact with her biological parents and son who share the same genetics. According to the textbook, genetics and environment are both responsible for personality. Environment is about 50 to 70%, and genetics is about 30 to 50%, so Emma could vary from both for her personality. Let's take a look at just the environmental side. I will use her friendship with Lily as an example for a non-shared environment. This means that someone with no shared genes can have a great impact on someone. And for Emma, her and Lily were great friends. Lily was a big impact on her. Lily was able to help Emma through a tough situation. Emma found herself in trouble with a family, and Lily showed her how to push through and do the right thing. She also showed her how to put others first. This truly showed an act of submissiveness and selflessness. Both of these qualities lead to a high personality and agreeableness. Now, we know that these qualities from Lily made an impact on Emma because they carried on through her adulthood life. When Emma moved to Storybrooke, she ended up coming in contact with Lily. This is when she learned that Lily was in great trouble. The Evil Queen was out to get her and her family. When Lily was faced with this great difficulty, Emma made the decision to help Lily, and Emma helped her follow through with what was right. She also put others first in order to do this. Now let's take a look at the genetic factors that helped influence and impact Emma's personality. To do this, we will look at the genotype-environment correlation. Emma clearly shows an active correlation as she is very high-risk seeking and outgoing into sensation environment. This is shown through fighting off many different villains, becoming friends with the evil queen, and also dating Captain Hook. Now these personality factors clearly come from her genes, because before when she was in New York, she still had risk-taking actions, which was something we definitely did not see Ingrid, her environment influence, have. However, we did see her biological influence have that, as her parents often took risk-taking actions by fighting off villains. Next, we will look at the second topic of consistency. The textbook essentially breaks down the topic of consistency into two different things. It's that personality traits are consistent over time, and personality traits are also consistent across all situations. I will break Emma's situations down into her first big living situation in New York in the real world, and her second big situation was living in the magical Storybrooke. And I will break her consistency over time basically across her entire lifetime, from a young child to an older adult. The first character trait that she shows consistency throughout her entire life is openness. From a young age to adulthood, she shows high levels of openness. In her adolescence years, she ends up meeting a man named Neil, and of course, she ends up falling in love with him. Now, one could say that Neil had money problems, but in his eyes, he was simply a man that was stealing and living with the bare necessities. Emma showed that she had an eccentric lifestyle by going along with him, which evidently shows a high level of openness. Later on in her life, when she is older, her son, who she originally gave up for adoption, finds her and tells her about magic. Although Emma was hesitant at first, she ends up forming a magical thinking mindset, which proves she is still high in openness despite that entire time passing. The next personality trait that I will discuss to show Emma's consistency over time is neuroticism. When Emma was a young girl, she showed a shameless personality. Emma gets pushed around from one foster home to another, where she gets teased in some form for not having a family history, but yet she doesn't let herself stay in those environments that point out her shameful past, and she keeps moving on. Eventually, as Emma gets older, she goes out and tries to find some information on her parents. Emma gets caught by a bounty hunter for stealing. When given the perfect opportunity to escape, Emma stays. Emma clearly shows further senses of shamelessness, because Emma doesn't care that this bounty hunter thinks she is a horrible person for stealing. She is true to her word. Emma's shamelessness characteristics that tie into her neuroticism personality clearly shows across all time. Next, I will explain how Emma's personality traits were consistent across situations. I will use that by using New York, living in the real world, and living in Storybrooke with magic. The first personality trait I will use as an example is Emma's low levels of extroversion. When living in New York, Emma did not like the center of attention. She laid low, she didn't participate in a lot of social events, and she was often on her own. Later on, when she lived in Storybrooke, she may have not been on her own as she was surrounded by family now. However, she still showed low levels of extroversion despite this turning of her life. The people of Storybrooke deemed her as the savior who came to save them from all evil in the town. However, Emma still did not like all that attention, and she didn't like everyone looking up to her. The next personality trait that I will use as an example of Emma showing consistency is agreeableness. Before Storybrooke, Emma showed true selflessness. She puts her childhood friend Lily first by helping her retrieve a special object, even though it could cost Emma the chance at a nice foster family. After being in Storybrooke, she puts the evil queen first by saving her from becoming the Dark One. This is truly another act of true selflessness, as she puts these people first. So to recap, Emma shows openness and neuroticism are consistent over time. She also shows extroversion and agreeableness are consistent across situations. However, let's look at her attitudes and interests. They are not consistent over time, which evidently matches up with how the textbook defines consistency. Emma's attitudes towards magic clearly change, as at the beginning she does not believe in it. But later on, after moving to Storybrooke and meeting her family and everyone else and seeing it, she does believe in it. The textbook clearly says that attitude and interests after a turning point in someone's life should not be consistent over time. My final topic to discuss is emotion. From this course content, this topic can be essentially broken down into 3 points. The first one being appraisal, which is how a person might interpret a situation, which essentially leads to how their emotions are shown. The third point is emotional trait. Emotional traits is an emotion reaction that is consistent for a person over time. And clearly, we've already discussed how Emma is consistent over time. The third point is indirect and direct model. Indirect model is when personality causes a person to create a certain lifestyle, and that lifestyle also causes emotion reactions. Whereas direct model is simply personality causes emotional reactions. To demonstrate emotion, I will use the example of guilt. Emma does have guilt throughout her entire life. When she was young, she felt guilty for not being able to maintain a foster family. And as she got older, she still felt guilty for giving her son up in a close adoption. Later on in life, she settles into Storybrooke, where she begins to feel guilty for failing to destroy the dark magic and letting Captain Hook almost die. Now, this is just how Emma reacted to the situation. Perhaps Emma isn't even aware of her response, which would tie into the appraisal theory. When trouble comes her way, Emma's reaction is to simply try and help. However, her personality causes her to fail over time and time again. This creates a certain lifestyle for Emma, and this lifestyle causes emotional reactions such as guilt. This would be a perfect example of an indirect model. Clearly, Emma's personality being backed up by her emotions, consistency, and genetic environmental factors has helped her defeat the dark magic within Storybrooke, and they all lived happily ever after.